live on the internet soon. We're live on the internet now. Welcome everybody. I'd like to introduce Hugh Newman, fellow Avalon Rising conspirator, author and traveller and researcher into ancient cultures and earth energies. And Geoff Stray, also a Mayan researcher and author who's written many books beyond 2012 and 2012 in your pocket. So please give it up for Hugh and Geoff, the 2012 brothers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, so today we're going to be exploring various different areas of research that me and Geoff have been independently looking into over the last decade, or for you probably a little bit longer. And our kind of research has kind of come together eventually. It's just sort of quite, you know, we sort of hang out together as well, so it's quite easy. We're really looking at the origins of this Mayan calendar that ends in December the 21st, 2012. I mean, everyone's kind of talking about 2012, especially Geoff, amongst others. And so I'm always questioning what is going on with the origins of the calendar, and this kind of grew and grew, this interest in it. So I started exploring it myself and went to Mexico a couple of times, and Guatemala and other places, and realized that the origins of the
The hairy bits.
What was that? Was that a bit of your moustache that got away or something? But anyway, so the origins of the calendar have really fascinated me. So, and I realised when I went to Mexico, I did a bit of research and started travelling, that the origins aren't necessarily Mayan, which most people assume they are because of the Mayan prophecies, because of the famous 2012 end date. But the origin of the calendar obviously starts in 3114 BC, arguably, although this has been debated. And so I'm interested in that kind of era, and and leading up to it, and where the origins may have came from. And Geoff's obviously been researching the end of the calendar in 2012, so we thought we'd put our heads together and give a brief kind of rough outline of some of the latest research on that's been discovered, and the implications of that, really, because it's great to know where we're going. I mean, 2012, the end date is next year, and there's a lot of talk about what is really going to happen. And so I wanted to have a look back at that era and find out what was going on then, really, and unlock it from a different perspective, and see if that has got any relevance looking at 2012 and these certain calendars today. So we get quite technical with some of the research, so bear with us, and if you've got any questions, just stick your hand up or shout or anything, and we can open it up for discussion during the talk, after the talk, whatever.
We can't actually see anything.
It's a bit bright, yeah, but that's okay. That's okay. So these are just some images that I put together. This is the Olmec, one of the heads of the Gulf Coast of Mexico. This is the Atlanteans that are at a place called Tula, which is not that far from Mexico City. That's an image of Quetzalcoatl, who we'll be talking about throughout the talk, and his relationship potentially to these calendars. This is a famous, that's now been destroyed, carving from Tikal, and this is obviously the area we're going to be looking at. So we'll have to get started, I guess. But Geoff decided to put these in, these other pictures, just because he thinks it's just actually my holiday snaps, which is obviously not true.
We were sat on top of the Hellstone here. This is part of the Megalithomania tour of the fantastic conference that Hugh organises every year. Brilliant conference. Okay. And he just took his socks off there to show off the colourful effect, but they also had other effects.
he put that in as well. I didn't know about this. All right.
That was taken at the very first, well, arguably the very first sunrise, which was,
I think
it wasn't really a sunrise, but it was a pre-sunrise, wasn't it?
Is it the Venus Transit Festival?
The Venus Transit Festival,
yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed that. Thank you. That's the highlight of the talk. That's not, it's just the effect me and Geoff obviously have on each other. We create orbs out of our heads, etc. But anyway, back to business. This is some of the bits and bobs we're going to be looking at. So, fundamentally, we're going to blast through some of the Olmec sites, questioning the calendar origins about this 3114 BC date, which is fascinating because that's when the pyramids started to get built in Egypt. It's also when the megalithic revolution was taken about around the entire planet, although most Mayan scholars believe it was actually formed around 100 BC to 100 AD by the Azarpans, which is in the Maya lands, and they projected the date back to 3114 BC. But why would they do that? So we'll have a look at that question as we go through. Geoff's going to get really into the calendars, so you get some understanding of the calendars, and lots of serpent symbolism tends to come up when we start looking at these sites, especially with the Quetzalcoatl legends and more. And the connections with Egypt. Geoff's going to give an outline of the Tortuguero monument, which is basically the only stone carving that has the actual 2012 end date on it. And again, we're going to look at the origins and throw it open to the audience. So as we know, the Maya lands is what most people know about Mexico, and I'm going to hand over to Geoff just for a little bit here. Go.
What about? I'm new to this. What do you want me to basically talk about the origins of the Maya? They don't actually officially go back to 3114 BC when the calendar, the 13 Bacton cycle, as we call it, of the long count calendar, is the cycle that ends in 2012. It started in 3114 BC, yet according to the official Mayanist position, the academia, there were no Maya around at that time. So they have always been saying that, like the way that we have dealt with our calendar, we backdated it to a mythological start point where Jesus was born. But of course, our calendar didn't start when Jesus was born. It started. When did it start?
After he was born.
Who cares? Our calendar's not very interesting.
But so potentially there could be a connection with, if that's so, then there could be a connection with the legends of Quetzalcoatl, which was the plumed serpent or the feathered serpent, which is a legend that was going on in deep prehistory, going through almost every culture in the Maya lands, the Olmecs, the Zapotecs, the Mixtecs, the Mayans, and almost every culture, they had this legend of Quetzalcoatl. And you get the same principles take place down in South America, right down in the Lake Titicaca, Bolivia, Peru, with Viracocha. And it's exactly the same kind of legend. But we'll describe some of his legends as we go through the talk. But this is the area we're kind of looking at, the main Olmec heartland here. And over here is the main Maya lands, but there was cultures, the Teotihuacan up here, you get the Zapotec areas, and many other, all the way, the famous Yucatan sites are mainly up here with Chichen Itza and others, and the Guatemala and Tikal here. And the Olmec influences weren't just in this area here, which is mainly around the Gulf Coast, but the origins go back to at least 2000 BC. I don't know if any of you have seen my talk I've done before about the Olmecs, or it's called Before the Maya. But these are just some of the famous sites, mainly Tres Zapotes, La Venta and San Lorenzo are the three key Olmec sites. And there's been some interesting discoveries at Tres Zapotes, especially this particular calendar carving, which we'll be having a look at. This is San Lorenzo. This was like the Olmec capital. This is one of the famous Olmec heads. Some people say it looks a bit like me, but I dispute that officially. I need to get one of those.
Yeah.
What's going on? What is going on?
I was just going to measure up for size.
Okay. And this is a place called, so San Lorenzo is like the mother site of the Olmecs, the most famous ancient. There's hardly anything there because it's like swamplands, and there's nothing really left to see apart from these few stone carvings that are left. But they had some interesting energies they were working with there as well. And some of these are dated to 1400 BC, which doesn't get anywhere near the origin date of the Mayan calendar, 3114 BC. But they were working with interesting technologies. This particular piece of iron ore magnet was found in the last couple of decades. And it's believed that all the sites were built upon these magnetic anomalies. So somehow they were working with magnetism and electric charge, and different types of. They had lots of water channels cut into many of their sites. So if they did invent the calendar way back then, they were certainly advanced enough to come up with it, or sophisticated enough, or intelligent enough. So that we really must possibly accept that as a possibility, that the Olmecs were involved in that. There's obvious connections with Egypt as well. The more you look into the Olmec carvings, the more connections you find with Egypt and Africa, or maybe Nubia, Egypt, and sort of other parts of Western Africa. You'll find the same symbolism. This is just one example here of the Egyptian sky goddess holding up the sky, and you get the same thing here, exactly the same thing. And there's many more. I'm just giving you one here just to go along with. So this is the site at a place called San Andreas, which is up near Leventa. They found one of the calendar examples. I mean, as Geoff will explain shortly when we get into the calendars, at San Andreas they found a glyph, or they found some carvings that had the 260-day sacred count of the Zolkin calendar, and these are some of the carvings here that display that. And so it suggests that they were definitely using that calendar, so they may have originated that one for sure. There's also the Harb calendar, which is the 365-day solar calendar, and obviously the long count calendar, which stretches over thousands of years, but Geoff will go into the details about that. Here's just another site called Leventa, which I went to visit, and this is the first pyramid that was supposedly built in Central America before all the other Mayan sites. This is what they think it may have looked like, kind of like a sort of seven-sided fluted pyramid with all these megalithic kind of structures throughout, including these strange people. But they were the first possibly evidence of using the wheel as well in the Olmec lands. Now, they didn't use it necessarily to do any major work, but they actually used it for toys, which I thought was quite interesting. It's probably too swampy there, but they had all these amazing serpentine temples buried right under the ground, all these pavements piled upon one another, which is a huge, it's like a masterpiece, but then they buried it in the ground for some reason. So there's a lot of dispute about why they would have done things like that. There's also evidence that they aligned Leventa to the different stars and may have developed precession at some of the Olmec sites. Studying the 26,000 year cycle. Here's just some of the other sites here. This is one of the Olmec heads in Leventa, and here's an unfinished one, and some other beastly looking features here. I'll just skip through these because I just want to show you some, give you a taste of the Olmec world. I really recommend, if you do go to Mexico, make it up to Villahermosa and go to Leventa Park. This is where many of the stones are. Here's another connection with Africa. Obviously, you probably noticed this with the Olmec heads. They have what appears to be Negroid or African features. You can see this here, you can see another example here, and you get the same style of coffins built by the Egyptians as you do the Olmecs. This is the work of a scholar called Ivan van Sertima. He's got a couple of books out. You can check out his work there. This is one of the Olmec heads that came from Tres Zapotes, now called a place called Santiago Tuxtla, which you can get to very difficultly on a bus. But Tres Zapotes is the site where the true kind of mystery about the origins of the calendar first really came about. And Matthew Stirling, back in the early 1950s and late 40s, was the main archaeologist there. And is just some of the other things they discovered. But this is the stone that has the inscription of the long count on it, which is the 5,125 year cycle from 3,114 BC up to 2012. And before this was out, all the Mayanists, all the scholars believed the Mayans invented the calendar. That's why it's called the Mayan calendar. But this proved that the Olmecs were definitely using a long count system, which is virtually the same.
Can I just say something there? It was actually Matthew Stirling's wife, because they found the bottom bit first, so they didn't have the Bacton number, which is the bar is 5 and the dot is 2. So just above the crack there is number 7. Oh, thank you. There, that's 7. So that means it's in Bacton number 7. But they didn't know that when they found the bottom bit, and most of the Mayanists were saying it must be Bacton 8 because that's what fitted in with their theories. But it was Matthew Stirling's wife who said no, she believed it was Bacton 7. And of course, some years later, when they found the other bit, she was proved right. Not only was she a woman, but she was only the archaeologist's wife as well. But yeah, she actually was more right than all they were. That's all.
Here's just another example, sort of reconstruction of it with all the dates down here. This is an image that Geoff put in the other day, one of the original photos when they discovered it. And here on the other side of this particular stone, and this is like probably about 5 or maybe 6 or 7 feet tall actually. There's this bizarre He-Man looking figure with all this kind of weird sort of chest thing he's got on, and also there what appears to be a kind of weird jaguar's face, which is a symbol that you get throughout the Maya, the Olmec world. And many other places. There's also another site was discovered called Chiapa de Corzo, which they found another date which related to around this era, which is around 31 to 37 BC. What happened there?
I'll put that in there for you.
Oh, you put another one in. Okay. And this is the stone here. So Geoff will give you a little outline about this.
Well, this is the earliest known long count date. Again, it's showing back to 7, but they're only really speculating that because it's in dots. Okay, that there, you see, obviously it's broken off again, so we're missing the Bacton number, which they've speculated is back to 7 again, because that now fits in with their slightly earlier acceptable date of where they thought it was the 8th Bacton for the last one. Then they went, no, it'll have to be Bacton 7 then. Now they don't want that to be any earlier than Bacton 7 because they will have to rewrite all the work everyone's done yet again. But you see, this bit here is the part of the Tzolk'in, so that tells you is that again is broken off. So you've got a bar and 1 dot. The position of that dot tells us that that number was either a 6 or a 7, and that they know what that glyph is as well, so they know that was one of 2 possible glyphs, and they know exactly what those are, but those actually could be something else. So we've got a what have we got next? What's that doing in there?
Well, you put it in there.
Oh, right, we'll get back to that later on, don't we? So anyway, we're just going to do a little sidetrack now about Maya calendars generally, and it is actually it's been tradition ever since 1915 when Morley produced this diagram in 1915, and ever since then, when people explain how the Maya calendars work, they've done it in terms of cogs. And here you've got the Tzolk'in, and on the other side you've got the Harb. That's the 260-day calendar and the 365-day calendar interlocking in a cog fashion, and so the only time you get the same combination coming back again is every 52 years, and they call that a calendar round. Well, the Mayanists have been saying for ages, oh, this is just for diagrammatic purposes to help us understand it, but the Maya would be horrified at anything like this. Yet, in the 17th century, when these books called the Chilam Balams were written, there were diagrams like this. Well, they were originated in the 17th century. Right, they go back to an original guy called the Chilam Balam, who was probably 15th century, but they were written down in the 17th. And so you actually have 2 cogging wheels to describe 2 calendrical cycles there. And so the point is that the concept is not as foreign to the Maya as some people would have us believe. Next, please. So we're going to be talking about the long count calendar. That's the one that involves this cycle that ends in 2012. And in my little calendar book, I produced a new way of looking at it. This is a slightly modified version of that. So basically, at the bottom here, you have got a 13-day cycle and a 20-day cycle. They interlock to give you the Tzolk'in, the 260 days. But this one here has got a dual purpose. It's also the bottom, the 20-day cycle of the long count. So each of the petals is a day. There's 20 of them. 20 of those is called a weanal. So the whole of this wheel is a weanal of 20 days. But the 20 times the 13 gives you this Tzolk'in here, 13. Every time that goes round once, it knocks this one round once. So once that's gone round once, you've got 13 weanals, which is 1 Tzolk'in. And then going up this way, 20 days times, this is the only exception here where there's 18 leaves on here instead of 20. And so 18 of these weanals gives you 1 tun. That's a 360-day year, 18 times 20. But then this, if you take it this way, that clicks this 13-leaf wheel round, so that 13 of those tuns is 13 tuns, a 13-ton cycle, which is recorded in the Dresden Codex. Then you again multiply by 20 up here. 20 tuns is 1 caton, that's just under 20 solar years. Multiply it by 13 this time, you get 13 catons, which is known as the short count calendar. That replaced the long count after it fell out of use around 900 AD. And then going up here again, multiplying by 20, 20 catons is 1 bacton, just under 400 solar years. Going this way, multiply it by 13, and you have the 13 bacton cycle. The one we're talking about, it started in 3114 BC and ends in 2012. But then if you go again this way, that little 5-point petal wheel, multiply the 13 bacton cycle by 5, and you have the 5 eras, which are described in Mayan mythology. And of course, if you count the amount of tons in the 13 bacton cycle, it's 5,200. Multiply it by 5, you get 26,000 tons, which is the precession cycle. So that describes a sort of evolutionary precession cycle. Then you go up again, and it's multiplied again, because in fact, although this is the 13 bacton cycle and explains the long count that ends in 2012, there were other longer cycles. Next one, please. So there you can see it actually keeps on. If you keep going, multiplying by 20 in that direction and 13 in that direction, we get pictons. 20 bactons is a picton. Now recently some of the Mayanists have been trying to shut everybody up about 2012, saying nothing ends in 2012 because the great cycle, as they call it, doesn't consist of 13 bactons, it consists of 20 bactons. Therefore, the cycle doesn't end till 4772 AD. And that is also recorded in King Pakal of Palenque actually recorded a date, a commemoration of his crowning, which will be a sort of an anniversary of it at the end of the Picton in another couple of thousand years. So the Mayanists have been using that to shut everybody up. But in fact, what they don't realise, and which is what I developed this diagram for, is to show that it's not an either-or situation. It's both. We have a 13 Picton cycle, just as we have a 13 bacton cycle and a 20 bacton cycle, 13 caton cycle and a 20 caton cycle. In fact, this goes through for all these cycles. Although the 13 ones don't have a relationship vertically in this diagram like the 20 ones, you know, all these cycles have a purpose. And the way I've written an essay especially to explain this, and I'm currently discussing it with a couple of these academics. But you know, they actually, it's looking good. I think I'm getting somewhere. The orange, the little orange colours, is the historical scheme. That's what we usually talk about as the cycle. If we give it a Maya date, 9/17/0000, 13 Ahau 18 Kumku, for example, that would be the normal way of writing that particular date, which was a date during the classic Maya period. Now, if you was to write the same thing using all these longer ones, the ones where the little red dots are, I've called that a meta-historic scheme. It's getting a little bit complicated now. I won't blow your minds too much with this, but basically there are some inscriptions that they can't explain just by this knowledge, so you have to basically come up with a diagram like that to explain these inscriptions, which are very long, bigger cycles, and it also explains inscriptions from Cobra and Yaxchilan, which can't be explained by any of those, and it explains the period ending dates and the short count, all explained in one marvellous diagram. Thank you very much. Yes. For calculating, and we're going to go back to where we were when I started that digression. For calculating these dates, to work out from that Tres Zapotes date that we had that was cracked and the bits was missing. This is the program that I've used. You can get this on my website if you go to the Maya date calculators page and go through to the link, download it. It's a lovely little calculator, and basically you've got the cabletons, the pictons, the bactons, the catuns, the tuns, the wenals, the kin, which is the days. And the short count it does as well, and it gives you the Julian day and the Gregorian day, and it gives you the Zolkin and the Harb, and even the Night Lord. So very handy little calculator that saves you having smoke coming out of the ears. Right, next one, please. So this is something that Hugh asked me to do for his before the Maya talk, because you know, realising that that bit was missing, he thought, you know, this could be the evidence we're looking for, that these long count dates actually originated much earlier than the academics are saying. Therefore, you know, we both like really annoying the academics. So basically, I got the calculator out and worked out using all the knowledge that is preserved on that piece of thing here. You remember, that's either a 6 or a 7, so all the Zolkin dates will either be 6 Ben or 7 Ben. I don't know why it says and there. That's a misprint. But those other numbers are, you know, they know what those are, but some of these are a little bit questionable. So that's the standard interpretation, that this in the Gregorian backdated calendar will be the December the 6th, 36 BC, the oldest known long count date. Which is pre-Maya, I see. So the Mayanists got annoyed about this, but now they've accepted it. But if it's any older than that, it's going to upset everybody. So these are possibles if they was to find this and it turned out to be any of these dates. Now, would you like to say any more about that?
I mean, the Chapa de Corzo, where it is actually right in the Olmec land. It's not even, potentially it could be an Olmec site, and there's a lot of sites in that whole area. Obviously there was where all these dates are preserved in stone. I mean, there's some other calculations we did as well, which are here, but the bottom row is the one that interested me the most, because it's 3249 BC, which is like 130 years before the 3114 BC date. So it just kind of, I thought that was particularly interesting, and also the one above that as well, the 2736 BC. But again, this is speculative until that other bit of stone gets discovered and we can actually work it out properly, which is probably likely. It's probably just in someone's garden as an ornament in the local area for all we know, so you never know. And these are some other dates you got from that as well. Can you explain these, Geoff? You remember doing that?
No.
Okay, let's get back to looking at big stones again then, just to keep everyone happy. So we're going to just drift back into the Olmec world for a bit, because our slides have gone into disarray. That's one of the heads from La Venta. Here's just some of the carvings as well, and you see here on this particular carving that was found at La Venta, it's got these strange glyphs here, and La Venta is known to be about 2000 to 1500 BC, probably about 1800 BC, you know, in reality. But there's no reason why they couldn't be much older. They found these very strange waterworks there as well, which would have been some of the first in the world. But these glyphs here kind of caught my attention. And there's another site called Comalcalco, which is north of La Venta, which we're going to have a look at briefly later, because it's got some bizarre carvings there from all these what appears to be different writings from all over the world, which would suggest there was transatlantic voyages and such other places. Here's La Venta again. These are just some of the heads. These are the bizarre kind of long heads you get in this part of the world. You get skulls that are like that as well. Here's the underground pavements here, which some people suggest may be glyph oriented. Here's just the Egyptian looking kind of kid here sitting down, and the Man Mountain, or the first ever pyramid of that area. And here this is very interesting, because we start this serpent symbolism on the bottom of this particular sort of Olmec altar, which we'll come back to shortly. But the other thing which is particularly interests me, which is a little digression, just because I find it completely fascinating. There's a really famous major earth energy current that goes through La Venta. It's this one here. And some of you may know Tor Webster's work or Robert Kuhn's work on the rainbow serpent. There's a great energy current that weaves around the whole planet. There's a second energy current called the plumed serpent, which goes the other way around the planet through the Americas and some other places in the Far East. And I traced it when I was there, and it came in through Coatzacoalcos, which is near La Venta, and through Tortuguero, which is a site that Geoff's been researching, and John Major Jenkins, which we'll come back to shortly. Also through Palenque and down through Capan and some other sites. This is where it actually goes. This is this one here. I found it down here as well when I went to Lake Titicaca. I found both of them crossing, in fact, on the Island of the Sun, which is a Viracocha sort of temple site. And here it's all the Quetzalcoatl temple sites, and they're both obviously got the same name of the plumed or feathered serpent. This is the famous extension of the Michael and Mary line, this one. And this is the other great current that goes around the planet. Anyway, I thought I'd just show you that as a digression. Again, there's my face, looking slightly Olmecoid. But this area here, Costa means actually serpent sanctuary. And it's the legendary beach where Quetzalcoatl arrived into that part of the world. And who's laughing? Or are you coughing? But this is the beach here, and I sort of decided to take a photo of the beach because it's been destroyed now. It's now an oil town, unfortunately. So there's nothing left there. So before you continue laughing, I'll just show you some other pictures. But Quetzalcoatl, the name obviously plumed serpent, or some people call it the rainbow serpent, feathered serpent, many different names. He was the god of wind, he was related to Venus, and he was really the legendary founder of many of the sort of traditions that ended up becoming famous in the Olmec, Zapotec, Mixtec, Mayan cultures, where he taught the arts of farming, the arts of civilization, even taught the art of vegetarianism and to stop killing and stop sacrifice that was prevalent very strongly in that part of Mexico at the time. And he basically taught peace, and some people relate him to a kind of Jesus-like figure. But he was supposed to be, he was very fair-skinned, he had bright eyes and wore these dark robes. That's slightly wrong, that image. And he turned up on this raft of serpents that made no noise and didn't have any oars, and just arrived on the beach at Quetzalcoatl, and they came onto the land and spread their teachings across the Maya lands and the Olmec lands of Mexico. So this is kind of, I find this really fascinating. I mean, who were these people? And almost every culture in the Mayan world, Zapotec, Mixtec, Toltec world, have references to this golden age when Quetzalcoatl was around. And so I find it really interesting that exactly the same legends, almost to the, exactly the same, were found in South America, Bolivia and Peru, under the name Viracocha, which again translates as the plumed serpent or the feathered serpent. And so who were the people who emerged from Lake Titicaca down there and taught all the arts of megalithic construction, agriculture, farming, and there's so many legends and stories that stretch back into prehistory. Many people believe that there was an actual man, a king, a Toltec king in the 10th century who resided at Tula, where the famous Atlantean megalithic columns are. But we believe now that he actually embodied Quetzalcoatl and sort of became and sort of lived out some of the legendary stories that he actually did. But anyway, this is where this particular line goes. Most of the sites upon these lines have dedications to Viracocha, to Quetzalcoatl. It's really similar to me when you get the Michael and Mary energy lines going through England. The Michael line tends to go to sites dedicated to St. Michael, St. George, and other such legends and saints, whereas the line is dedicated to St. Mary and to Bridget and to other kind of goddess kind of people. So the same kind of principle may be happening with these energy lines in this part of the world. But this is just speculation, early research on that at the moment, but I just thought I'd put that in there. But particularly it goes through La Venta, which is up near the coast. And this here, along the bottom here, you may see this, is what appears to be a serpent. And actually this is a queen or a sort of goddess figure. Her arm suddenly turns into a serpent, where it touches the ground and then comes around this side. And he's holding the guy there, the sort of priestly kind of shaman guy's holding the energy against the ground. I believe that's a symbol of earth energies. And you can see here some other serpent heads coming in from different angles. So yeah, I found that particularly interesting. And there's other serpent symbolism as well throughout the Americas, which Geoff's going to have a little chat about now.
This is the actual same pyramid I've got on my t-shirt here. It's the pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza.
And Kukulkan is another name for Quetzalcoatl, a later name.
Yeah, that's what the Maya called Quetzalcoatl, because the Toltecs brought the knowledge down from the north when they inhabited Chichen Itza, and this temple was built to commemorate what they then called Kukulkan.
Can I just add something there? Because Kukulkan, I mean, there's a legend of the 10th century Toltec king who was at Tula, or supposedly it was called Tolan then, the legendary city of Tolan. He was driven out by this dark god who I can't remember the name.
Tezcatlipoca.
Oh, of course, yes. And he drove out, he was called the Smoking Mirror as well, was his other name, and he drove out Quetzalcoatl and wanted to bring back in sacrifice and all these dark arts. So he fled. Some legends say he fled and left Mexico and Guatemala altogether and disappeared on his raft of serpents, promising to return at this particular time in the future on a particular sort of era or date. But some people say he fled to Chichen Itza and actually founded the Toltec city of Chichen Itza, which is what Geoff's talking about now. So, but then, incidentally, I just throw this in, I might as well just throw it in now. When the Spanish came, when Cortez came in 1519 or thereabouts, and he arrived on the Gulf Coast in these boats that floated and didn't make any noise, with all these white-looking people with beards and robes who then got off the boat. So all the locals believed it was the return of Quetzalcoatl, especially because of the date he arrived on. The day he arrived on was one of the prophetic dates, which was related to when Quetzalcoatl said he would come back many thousands of years earlier. So they welcomed him in, thinking they were the gods returning. So this is incidental, but that's just why they had such power over the Mexicans and were able to sort of overthrow the entire culture and the Aztecs in one foul swoop. So, sorry, over to you.
Right. Well, the Maya associated Quetzalcoatl with Venus because it said that he turned into Venus in one of the myths. He threw himself into the fire, didn't he, one of them, and then became a star, which was Venus. But unlike our conception of Venus as the planet of love, they had a war association with Venus. It was when Venus was rising was a good time to go into battle. But some people have suggested that there's a connection with the Venus transits. You know, we had one in 2004, and 8 years later we have one in 2012. With a 2-day difference, because it's exactly 8 Maya halves rather than 8 of our years. They didn't have leap days, so it's exactly 8 halves between the transits of Venus. And looking back through previous transits of Venus, there have been interesting developments, historical sort of jumps in knowledge between the Venus transit points. And so some people have suggested that previously they were expecting, I think it was when Cortez arrived, was actually between 2 of these Venus transits, and that's why they mistook him for Quetzalcoatl. But you know, of course, in 2012 the Venus transit will be on the 6th of June. It was on the 8th of June in 2004. I just thought I'd mention that. So. At Chichen Itza, you have these stone snake heads at the bottom of the pyramid, and every spring equinox, you have the shadow play. I mean, you've probably all heard about it. Thousands of people know about it, and every year now. But as the sun goes down in the afternoon, you get a shadow play. Starts down the zigzaggy bits of the steps, and it's enhanced by the snake head and looks like a giant snake coming down the pyramid. Well, it turns out that in the Yucatec Maya language, the word for the tail, well, the rattle on the end of that rattlesnake, the same rattlesnake that's used in all the art of the Maya, they call it Zab. And that happens to be the same word they used for the Pleiades constellation. And then there's a little marking on that same snake that looks like a little smiley face. It's the same as the Maya glyph for the sun, which is Ahau. So what John Major Jenkins has done, this is his diagram, he's basically realised that this whole thing is encoding an astronomical alignment between the zenith sun, that's where the sun is exactly in the sky overhead in the tropics. It happens twice a year. But when that combines with the Pleiades, somehow this thing is an alarm clock, bringing that celestial alignment into our attention. And it's something that will happen because the Pleiades is 5 degrees wide and 1 degree of precession takes 72 years. It's 360 years it will take for the sun to cross the Pleiades, because precession, remember, is moving the stars slightly in the other direction from the way that the planets go, while the sun stays the same place, you know, every year on the same day. So over 360 years, the sun crosses the Pleiades, but that is just starting now. So this is really an alarm clock starting in 2012, according to Jenkins's deduction here, that shows us about this conjunction of the Pleiades and the sun, because this is the exact same way that the Aztecs and the Toltecs used to use to measure precession. They go up a hill every 52 years, actually, to see where the Pleiades was at midnight. Because if the Pleiades was directly overhead at midnight, they knew that 6 months away on the zenith passage day, that it would be the end of the world, because so-called, because the sun would be conjuncting the Pleiades. So they've passed this whole cosmology on to the Yucatec Maya, who've encoded it in this pyramid. And on that day in 2012, well, it's not the actual equinox. It's actually 60 days after the equinox that this happens, when you get this configuration that is given to us by the snake symbolism there. And it will actually also be the day of a solar eclipse on the 20th of May next year. And there you have it. So the snake, you can see it interestingly. Where's that pointery thing? This is the a certain species of rattlesnake, and I've gone and forgotten what the title, the name of it is in Latin now. But basically, it's got these little pyramids on it, and it has 13 scales around the mouth and 13 rattles on the tail. And it's been a really heavy influence in Maya art, mathematics, and culture. And the actual fact that the snake also sheds its skin gives it the symbolism of rebirth as well. And then here you have Quetzalcoatl in the mouth of the snake. And that also, the god in the mouth of the snake has other symbolisms which have to do with 2012, because it also means the head of the god represents the sun, and the mouth of the snake or the jaguar toad or the crocodile represents the dark rift of the Milky Way, or the birth canal of the great cosmic mother. And that represents the alignment of the winter solstice sun with the galactic plane at the fat part of the Milky Way, which is the visual galactic center, which is what Peter mentioned earlier on. And snakes have also been referenced in crop circles like this one, which shows an Ouroboros, where the snake swallowing its own tail, giving us the meaning of time cycles. So it has all these meanings as well. You want to talk about snakes?
Well, yeah, because talking about Ouroboros or Ouroboros, this is like that around the planet, because these kind of go all the way around the planet, these particular energy lines. So I find that symbolism quite interesting. It's connected actually in these earth energies that kind of go through this part of the world, where this is actually been referenced in legend and in myth. So and also it goes through another site down here, Kapan. This is what I didn't mention earlier. But yeah, we'll just have a little look at that, and we're going to move back into our next segment of the talk. It's about this area here, Tortuguero. This is something that John Major Jenkins and Geoff have been researching and challenging what the scholars have been saying about it. I went to Tortuguero because Geoff told me to go there when I was in Mexico.
Good boy.
And these are the photos I got, but actually nothing. Yeah, thanks. These are the photos I got, but it's actually been totally destroyed, unfortunately. And it's the only the Mayan site. It's contemporary with Palenque, more or less. It's not far from Palenque. It's about 40, maybe 30 miles away. But we went up there, and I went up there with this guy Ivan Orozco, and we met a local guide, and they showed us around, and we got chatting with all the locals, and they gave us a guided tour, but there's nothing left. They say that the military came in 12 years ago and actually destroyed the whole site after looting it. This was never recorded officially, but this is what was witnessed by the locals, and it has then been slowly eaten up and taken down by the quarry that's been built next door. But the reason Tortuguero is so important, because it's one of the only, if not it's the only stone, the only carving that actually has the end date that references this December the 21st, 2012, and it's obviously in many different parts. Many of you who were at Megalithomania would have seen John Major Jenkins discuss the latest photos and the latest research on that. So I'll let Geoff describe this image on the left, because it kind of gives an interpretation of it, and new interpretations have come out. Over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I won't try and pronounce this language, but this is one of the first. I think this is actually, yes, this is a. It's not an official Mayanist, this guy, but he's based his translation on what David Stewart, who's an epigrapher, said. But there's one major difference. He calls himself Pakal something or other. The Pakalian group, yes. The main difference is this glyph here, anyway. Basically, 8 school years and 3 times 400, that's the Bacton, 360 days. There you've got basically 8, that's the symbol for the Bacton. This is at the ending of a period symbol. That's the 13th Bacton, 4 Ahau, 3 Kankin. These 3 glyphs together give you 21st of December 2012. That's 3 calendars cross-referencing each other. Then it will happen. Darkness. Now this is one of the controversial glyphs because first of all they just have it will happen, but several epigraphers then said no, it's basically darkness, because the trouble is, you can see over here the glyphs have been chipped off, so they were having trouble coming up with anything for these, but for a while they were saying darkness. And it will be the descent. That's of this symbol here is you see the 9. That's the 9 support god, so-called, which is Bolonyoktiku. It's translated as the 9-footed god, amongst other things. So it's a return of this 9 god group and they couldn't finish it because the last glyph was missing. So that was the state of affairs in 2006 when this was first put into the public domain. So. What the Mayanists have been saying about this recently, it's come up in discussion recently because everybody's been talking about it, so they have basically decided to try and shut everybody up about it, as they usually do. And Stephen Houston here said, Monument 6, it has nothing to do with prophecy or the supposed dread events that wait us in AD 2012. About that, the Maya are notably silent or, truth be told, a bit boring. And then along comes Mark Van Stone and says, yes, I agree with Houston, it is a bit boring. So it's supposed to, don't bother looking at that, it's just too boring to even consider.
I don't know, I mean that if you go back to that, I mean just what it says there, in December the 21st, 2012, there will be darkness and there'll be descent of the 9 gods to Earth, probably. So there's going to be darkness and what, a load of aliens or something come down? What's that?
Well, this is what we look at next. What could this mean? Yeah.
Okay.
And the next one, yeah. This is what's left. No, back a bit. This is what's left of it. That bit and that bit. That's the bit you saw the photograph of there. This is the bit with the wing, as they call it, with the 2012 date on it. There was originally another wing here, which may have been looted by the military. In fact,
flange, they could call it.
A flange would be a good word for it. Yes.
That's what Charles said.
That bit's in Villa Hermosa Museum with that bit. Those 2 are in private collection. No one knows who's got it anymore. That bit's in the Metropolitan Museum, New York, and those 2 bits are also in Villa Hermosa. So, what it basically, the dates on this, including the couple that were probably on this bit, it tells us that this was erected to commemorate an underground shrine called a Pibna, and that shrine was completed in 510 AD. This was erected in 669 AD. The site was discovered in 1915. The first study was published in Germany in 1978. The site was destroyed when a cement factory was put on it in 1981, and then finished off by the army, as Hugh mentioned. And then the first study published in English by Sven Gronemeyer was in 2006, and that's when everybody was really started talking about it. So just looking close up at that bit that we've translated just now, I got Gronemeyer's German, for the first German work he did on this, and with some help from a German friend, I came out with this version of it, slightly different. If you going past the preamble there, it goes blah blah. It was 2 days, 9 Wienels, 3 Tuns, 8 Katuns and 3 Bactons before the 13th Bacton is completed on 4 Ahau, 3 Kankin. Then it will happen. Darkness, and Bolonyokti will descend to the. So Gronemeyer also was coming in with darkness there. But the interesting thing is that they're describing the Pibna, the underground chamber that this was associated with, as having a function of nascent becoming, which is really rebirthing. And that's a concept that comes up a lot in association with 2012. And it's also called a becoming ripe house or an underground house. Anyway, the Mayanists like to do transliterations. It's not proper translation. They want to keep it accurate, and what you come up with doesn't actually make a lot of literal sense. So if you was to put it into English, it would be something like, this precious stone was set up in the shrine portal 158 years and 38 days after the 7th of December 510 AD, when Akal Cook's rebirthing shrine was completed. This was 1502 years and 14 days before the end of the current era on December 21st, 2012. Then it will happen, darkness and the descent of the 9 underworld gods to that, because it's now established that the 9 Bolon-Yoktiku gods are very, very similar, if not the same thing, to the 9 underworld gods.
So, Geoff, was this, because there's all this talk about the Mayan prophecies going on and on and on before this even got discovered and was researched. Is this like backing up the whole Mayan prophecies idea now?
Well, yeah, up until 2006, the official academic position was the Maya were not interested in 2012. There's no evidence whatsoever in the inscriptions. There's virtually quoting them word for word. Nothing in the inscriptions, nothing in any of the codices. There's no evidence at all to indicate they're at all interested in it, and it's all been invented by New Age people. And then, of course, I was involved in a discussion that actually projected this into the public domain, because Robert Sittler, who'd written an essay saying something very similar to what I just said, had put that on a university website, and I got into a discussion with him on email, and I sent him some evidence from the Chilam Balams that made me convinced that he's not correct on that. Anyway, he thought it was sufficiently interesting to ask some epigraphers directly where he'd been indirect before, and that's when Stuart came up with that translation that we heard just now. Did I go off topic there?
I don't know.
Anyway, so Gronemeyer has recently taken a new look at this. He's originally started on work on it by himself, and he's finished off the paper with another Mayanist called Barb MacLeod. But having looked through the paper is a bit disappointing, because there seems to be an effort to try and do exactly what Houston suggested and make it all rather boring. A new drawing has been drawn since they got hold of some better photographs, and they found that the darkness glyph actually is not darkness, it's something else. The bottom glyph, they have then used a lot more projections to decide that that actually has a possible meaning that fits in with what they think it might mean. So on to the next one. This discussion, some of the correspondence is in Van Stone's book, and it involves all these Mayanists here. That's Michael Grove, who's a sort of he's been working with Jenkins a little bit. I'll say more about that. That's the child prodigy, originally from 12 years old. This guy Stuart was able to translate glyphs better than the academic professionals, and there's footage of him working along with them. This is Barb MacLeod, who's also been doing some good work along with Grove to show that the Maya did precession and they encoded it into their inscriptions. That is a nice picture of the whole thing reconstructed of the right-hand flange. Anyway, what Van Stone came up with half before Gronemeyer had put out his first publication was this: will have been completed the 13th Bacton, will happen the witnessing attending of the display of Bolon-Yokti in the great impersonation envelopment in costume and regalia. Now, he was trying to make it boring, I contend, and I think he succeeded pretty well there. But when Gronemeyer's first effort appeared, this is not the final version, but basically the main differences were that one, instead of darkness, became see or a seeing. That one, he Bolon-Yoktiku holds, and that one, which was previously untranslatable, they say, is in a great encircling, like we just heard. But at the beginning of Sven's piece, he introduced the whole thing by saying exactly what I mentioned just when I was talking about the calendars, saying nothing ends in 2012 because there's actually 20 Bactons in the 13 Bacta cycle and not 13. But this is an effort by the Mayanists to try and shut everyone up about it But to do that, they have to resurrect an ancient argument from 1915, which is totally outdated, because in 1950, Thomson established that there's a 13 Bacton cycle and a 20 Bacton cycle, as shown in my diagram. Next one, please. So what Gronemeyer's first effort was this: it will be completed the 13th Bacton, its 4 How 3 Kankin out will happily seeing. He Bolon Ku holds shows in a great encircling. Still doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? And then Sven actually says, yes, it is a bit boring. They're like admitting it, really. But this is where it gets interesting, because he shows the workings out and the various possibilities. All those glyphs have been translated not just in that one way in the past. They've been translated in many different ways, as you can see here. So he shows could be all these different things, and the other part could even be dilute, dissolve, or prepare the coffee. You know, so there's a huge variety of different meanings that could end up with something that is not boring at all, as we will demonstrate in the next slide. So you could have, and there will be a revelation, and there will be an apparition, and people's eyes will be opened, and there will be mass visions, and perceptions will pierce the veil. These are all interpretations that fit in with the other meanings given. And that one, the writing has completely disappeared. Oh, click the thing, it might appear. Hang on, click it again. Ah, yes. Bolon Ku will be, this is the second bit, will be imprisoned in sealed in a great enclosure. Could also be Bolon Ku will make the coffee. Bolon Ku will reveal a huge crop circle. Or Bolon Ku will be proclaimed as Godfather. Bolon Ku will start a great whirling. Bolon Ku will offer a great prayer. And Bolon Ku will proclaim the great wedding, or the spiritual wedding. All far more interesting than the standard interpretation, giving us combinations such as, at the completion of the 13th Bacton on 4 How 3 Kankin, there will be mass hallucination as the deity 9-dog tree reveals the circle of tutelary gods. Or, at the completion of the 13th Bacton on 4 How 3 Kankin, there will be a mass enlightenment when the 9-footed god inaugurates the spiritual wedding. Or, at the completion of the 13th Bacton on 4 How 3 Kankin, the veil will dissolve when the 9-fold god encircles the ecliptic. Not boring at all, is it? But this is a good one. At the completion of the 13th Bacton on 4 How 3 Kankin, there will be the apocalypse, which actually means a revelation or a seeing, when the 9 gods of the underworld, yes, those people said that and they're official, put everything in order. We like it. So who are these 9 gods that everyone, that it keeps coming up here? Well, according to Michael Grove and that other one just now, the Bolon Ku are the same person as the Lord of the Underworld. And here's some of the evidence. This is God El, Lord of the Underworld, and this is something that's shown in the Temple of the Cross at Palenque, which is actually described as a pibna, the same kind of underground chamber, possibly as the Tortuguero monument was set up to commemorate. Here you can see something called the skeletal centipede. Goes over his shoulder, comes down the other side. On it are 9 little footsteps, collecting us up to the God of 9 steps, Ku. So that's one of the pieces of evidence that this is the very same as the God of the Underworld. And there he is in the underworld with some other gods, and Bolon Ku's glyph is right in front of him there. So God El was chief of the underworld, present at creation, appears in Xibalba, which is the underworld. Yes, I just said that, okay. So the very latest interpretation of this, in the second version of Gronemeyer's Revelations, was that what this is actually probably about is connected to a ceremony that goes on every year in Santiago Atitlan, a little town on the Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. They have this statue called Mashimon, and that's a picture of it there. They dress it every year at Easter. They dress it up. It used to be done at the Wayeb, which are the 5 days added onto the 360 at the end of the Harb, so it's the end of a time cycle. They dress this thing up, offer it gifts of tobacco and alcohol, and at the end of the period they hang it by the neck and then chop to pieces. Very similar to what actually goes on in Hastings every year on the May Day, which is very welcoming in the spirit of summer. All the Morris dancers arrive. They go through the town with this huge effigy called Jack in the Green, made out of leaves, and they take it up to the castle. They all dance around all day, and then they all rip it to pieces, and you take a bit home with you. And it's about the end of a time cycle and the beginning of a new time cycle. Well, there's now a suggestion that what the Mayanists think that Tortuguero monument means is that this is what Peter mentioned, that the king of Tortuguero is expecting to sort of reincarnate at a ceremony in 2012 where he will preside over this ceremony, and the statue of the 9 gods will be just like the Mashimon statue, where it will be dressed up, sort of worshipped, and then ripped to pieces to bring in the giant time cycle of the new 13 Bacton cycle. And it could represent possibly this is the maize god, who is an alternative version of Wanahao, the sun god, which is the sun eclipsing the galactic centre, resurrecting in the spring, defeating God El. That's what happens every year, but on a larger level, the maize god could be resurrecting in 2012 for the new 13 Bacton cycle, and Bolon Yokti, the 9 gods of the underworld, will fall back into a dark place using that darkness interpretation. All right. So the very final version that Gronemeyer came up with, slightly improved on this previous one. It will be completed the 13th Bacton. It's 4 Hau 3 Kankin. It will happen to seeing. It's the display of Bolon Yokti in a great investiture. So they see it as a ceremony in which, they dress up this god as a sort of welcoming in the new era, and that's so they haven't completely discounted 2012. But they've kind of watered it down a bit. But what Jenkins has been discovering with Growth is quite interesting. All these 13 dates on that monument all relate to number 13 is the December 2012 date. All the other dates on it relate directly to that date. And it turns out that every one of them has an astronomically significant event associated with it. They found this from astronomical software, winding them back to those dates. And they found, the winter solstice sun is in the DR's dark rift in 2012. It turns out Balamahau, the lord of, or the king of Tortuguero, was actually born when the sun was in the dark rift, and the Pibna was erected when the sun was in the dark rift, and the dark rift comes up quite a lot in the other dates with conjunctions of various planets involving Jupiter, Mercury, Venus. It's work that's still in progress and all being still looked at. Very interesting stuff. Yeah. Now this is where it connects up to Hugh's theory, because recently they came up with this drawing from Comwalcalco, which was drawn in 1984, but in 1990 Eric Book said this inscription means 4 Hau 3 Kankin arrives, it will be completed, meaning that there could have been another reference to 2012. Shock horror. But then in July last year, Mark Zender says, no, it's not. You're mistranslating it. It's 4 Hau 3 Zul. He arrives at Zuk-Kak, which has got nothing to do with it. So they do disagree with each other very regularly. But the interesting thing is that this other squiggle alongside of it has been said to be Malinki, which is a sub-Saharan script linking the whole of this Comwalcalco and the origins of the Maya calendar with an African connection. Mm. And they actually found that the Zolkin is very similar to a calendar that they found on Tenerife, where they have a 520-day cycle, which is 2 Zolkins. Over to you.
Okay. Back to you, Geoff. Yeah.
Right. Just a little bit more question on who the 9 gods are, if these people or beings are associated with the beginning of this 13 Bacton cycle and with the end of it next year. Who are they? These are the glyphs, various glyphs that have been used to represent them. There are various names for them: numerous strides, God of 9 steps, 9-dog tree, 9-footed God, jaguar-foot tree. This is really all possible ways that term Bolon Yokti can be translated. They're gods of conflict, warfare, dangerous transition time, social unrest, eclipses, natural disasters like earthquakes. They appear at the end of Bactons, and they came when the Spanish arrived. According to the mythology, anyway, assisted at the last creation, and they will be present at the next creation in 2012. Right.
Because there is actually carvings of the 9 gods at this certain temple in Palenque. There's 3 of them there on the left. I'm sitting down next to them on these great megalithic steps there. But so there's quite a few references to them in a particular...
They're in the tomb of Lord Pakal at the bottom of the Temple of Inscriptions. They're all around the edge there. Well, there's 9 gods surrounding his tomb.
What, actually on the lid? Or
No,
tomb?
that's the tomb lid. On the walls surrounding the lid are 9 gods. They all look very similar, don't they? We've seen this bit.
Have we?
Oh, keep going.
Okay.
I think I might have put it in twice.
Okay, cool. So we've just been looking at, obviously the 9 god different things, but there's a whole load of sites that as you head further south through Mexico and into the Azapa region, then go into Guatemala, this area here. This is the site that John Major Jenkins has been working with a lot, and there's a whole load of other sites going into southern Guatemala. This is just, I'm just going to show you some images just to, I suppose, watering about it. This is very bizarre headdress of this particular kind of warrior type dude. Weird teddy bear headed dude there punching a little person. And then you get these glyphs here, which kind of caught my attention, which have never been deciphered. No one knows what language they are, but there's potential connections with the Mayan glyphs. And also here you get these kind of these guys here holding up all this upon it. So there's lots of stuff that still hasn't been worked out yet. This is a place called Bilbao, which is one of the most dangerous places in Guatemala, we found out after we got there. And in the fields there, they've got these huge stones with bizarre carvings on. But there's this whole area has connections with calendars. I mean, Abash Takalik, which is a place we'll get to in a moment, and Izapa all have these sort of effigies, and there's particular, I mean, this is what John Major Jenkins has been working on particularly. He believes all the Mayan creation stories are linked in with all the different glyphs and carvings at Izapa, but we won't really have time to go into that now. But I just want to show you some images just to, here are some, what is going on out there? It's getting a bit mental. These are some sort of psilocybin mushroom carvings which have been found in this part of Central America, and huge megalithic blocks as well. So I'm just going to give you a little kind of a holiday photos thing for a few minutes, but we come back to the serpent symbolism as well, with the double serpent intertwining, and in the mouth of the serpent here is like, well, it's like a person being eaten by them. I thought it was their tongue sticking out originally, but it could be a person stuck in there, which is yeah, quite interesting. This is a weird Olmec head found in a place called La Democracia in southern Guatemala, which has got what appears to be spectacles on, or sunglasses, and he looks a bit, doesn't look too happy. And here's some Buddha type features as well, which is a place called Monte Alto that these came from originally. And these are bizarre culture that no one has a clue about where they came from. But this is really all in the region of Izapa, which is the place John Major Jenkins has been researching. I don't know too much about Izapa myself, but Geoff might want to say a few words on this. But what caught my attention was these particular kind of serpent symbolism, and the Bufo marinus toad has got lots of carvings of that there. Plus there's connections with the serpent and Egypt again. We find that type of symbolism with the serpent and the wings coming off this godlike being. Here you get the same thing in Egypt with the winged person, which could be a representation of Quetzalcoatl, and this could be a representation of Osiris, because lots of the myths from that part of the world are connected.
That thing at the bottom there, him, that according to Jenkins' research, this represents the god One Hunahpu, who is the solar deity. These are the solar rays, and if you go back to the last one, you can see that he's actually in the mouth of a big toad there. Well, that mouth represents the dark rift of the Milky Way, which is also seen as a birthing place. And so it's talking about the conjunction of the sun with the dark rift. And that's something that actually takes 36 years, because the sun's half a degree wide and precession is 72 years per degree approximately, or 71. And so from 1980 to 2016, the sun will be crossing that. But during that period is the end point of the calendar, which Jenkins has basically done a very good job of showing that that's why they put it there.
Okay, we're just going to show you some pictures of some toads and mushrooms for a little while, just to change the subject. But one of the things that keeps coming up in this part of southern Guatemala is, which I believe, John Major Jenkins believes, and Geoff probably believes, their visionary states they were having way back then, like we're talking 100 BC to possibly right into the Olmec era of 2000 BC. They were obviously taking all these psilocybin type mushrooms. There's all these toads available. And there's a little discussion we're having about this, whether there was actually Bufo marinus toads in that part of Mexico. But the Bufo marinus toad apparently excretes this substance from its shoulders if you hassle it a bit and poke it. And if you collect that and dry it out in the correct manner, then smoke it. It's
on the windscreen of your car. It's good, apparently.
Sorry, what?
To dry it. Stick it on your windscreen.
Right,
scrape it off.
But if you smoke it, it's actually like 5-MeO DMT, which is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, you can actually have on the planet. I think Geoff's actually had. Did you have some? Oh no, you got someone else to take it.
That's
didn't
right.
you?
I took notes.
Yeah. And so they think that because in San Lorenzo in the Olmec lands, they found lots of these bones of these particular toads, which suggests that they were using it in a ceremonial fashion. And somehow they got preserved. So there's suggestions that they were smoking DMT, and this could be the inspiration and the visions you get from this kind of thing, like ayahuasca and other stuff.
But everyone says it's Bufo marinus, but in fact, if you look at it on Erowid, they reckon there that it's Bufo alvarius, because that's the Colorado cane toad, and they say it's further north. That just contains bufotenine, the hallucinogenic effects of which are arguable. This one, according to Erowid, contains the bufotenine plus the 5-MeO DMT, and that's the dimethyltryptamine. 5-MeO is a slight modification on that. But the thing is that this, under certain circumstances, is produced in your pineal gland anyway. And I think that's got something to do with 2012, actually.
But there's lots of, there's so many carvings in that part of southern Guatemala, which have got this bufo toad on it, and also these psilocybin mushrooms. So it does suggest they revered them, and they weren't just recreational or anything like that. It was actually part of their culture. And you can see in the graphic down there at the bottom in the middle there, the guy waving them about in a very happy way. And so there is something going on there. And like you say, we do excrete DMT from our pineal gland anyway. And what is the story on that you mentioned?
Well, if you want a quick, someone asked me earlier on to give them a quick resume on my favourite theory. Well, I can repeat it for you if you like. I think that the whole solar system is travelling into an area of charged plasma. The plasma is seeping into the solar system, causing atmospheric and magnetic changes on all the planets, and kicking off the solar activities, which are going to culminate in record-breaking solar maximum next year, as predicted by NASA. But that will also, cause. It's also responsible for the increasing Earth changes we're seeing, and the plasma coming in will cause changes to the people's subtle bodies. And there'll also be a kicking off of either a magnetic inversion or a movement of the geomagnetic field that will then cause the mental trigger of the pineal gland, which has little magnetite crystals in it, to kick it into secreting DMT and possibly harmine as well, which are the two hallucinogenic ingredients of ayahuasca, and they've both been proven now to be secreted in the pineal gland under certain circumstances. So that could cause a sort of mass visioning of mankind. So look out.
I'm not really sure what to say after that, to be quite honest with you. But I'll just show you some pictures of mushrooms, stones. I think that might be the answer. This one's got one on his head. Look, on the right there. And there's another one here. This is all in the Guatemala City Museum. It's really worth going here if you're in that part of the world. There's some amazing stones and artifacts there. Huge amount of frogs and mushrooms, surprisingly. And Abash Takalik, there's some interesting discoveries here which interest me. And there are also relationships. There's some carvings related to the long count calendar here that have been sort of mentioned on a few of the stones, which John Major Jenkins pointed out. But the thing on the right here is on the left here rather, is what they think is a classic Olmec head that's been discovered in southern Guatemala, which is the only one. You can see the ear piece there. It's been kind of buried and destroyed like much of the Olmec sites were. And so there's a huge diffusion of these cultures spreading out through different parts of the world. And I'm just gonna skip through these last few slides because there's way too many here for the time we've got. So, I mean, basically, I think we're going to sort of round things up pretty shortly. But one of the theories I like to do with what we've been discussing is the idea that in 3114 BC, these Quetzalcoatl people turned up on the Gulf Coast, and they learned all this knowledge from wherever they came from. Some people say it was Atlantis, some people say it was other places. And something happened before that that caused this worldwide movement of people moving around the planet. And I think there was possibly a cataclysm. Edmund Marriage and some other researchers believe there was something happened in Austria in about 3200 BC, which would be just before this time the calendars began and the pyramids started getting built and the Pharaonic Age in Egypt started and the megalithic explosion happened. And so I suggest that these people were from this continent, or from they went around the world to sort of recalibrate and resurvey the planet, to bring the arts and sciences back around the planet. And these were some of the peoples that were doing that, and they deliberately marked that date 3114 BC because that's when it all was happening. And so if they were marking something cataclysmic happening at the beginning of the calendar, I don't want to, get too doom and gloom, but perhaps they were marking something at the end of the calendar we need to take a look at. And this is one of the reasons they were so obsessed with time. And I've got a sort of strong sense that that might be the case. And there's, with all these Venus transits and these precessional alignments all taking place, there's certainly something to consider there. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
Where's my little slide with that writing on it?
Oh, that's gone. Where was that?
I don't know.
So we look at. Well, we're going to go into some crop circles because I think we've had enough of big stones for the evening. Because there's some theories that we've been sort of trying to deduce from them, and Geoff's sort of got a whole load of new data. We're not sure, obviously there's a discussion if they're man-made or not. I watched this video on YouTube the other day that was convinced. Well, whoever made it was convinced that there's a connection between the Mayans and the crop circles, and it was pretty vague. It was made by someone called UFOTV.com or something like that, so it could be pretty random. But I think as time's running out, we'll jump into this segment now.
Okay. These are some of the best examples of crop circles that have been associated with Maya calendars in 2012. This one here in 1998 appeared near Silbury Hill. There's 33 of these little flame-like things, and so people were saying there was an interesting story with this because they had the Dreamtime Festival in Glastonbury at the time, and they were trying to create a crop circle by imagining, and it sort of seemed to fit in exactly. It was Luna Yaxkin Joy involved in it, and this is what came up the very next day, and they went there and just found it. Because 20 plus 13 is 33, but 20 times 13 is 260, which is the sacred Tzolk'in calendar. This one here, there are 20 of the dots around the edge and 18 of these squiggles in the middle. 20 times 18 is 360. Tun, another major cycle in the calendars. But this one is very convincing because it's actually identical to, I just coloured it in to emphasise here, but that's identical to a diagram in Jose Arguelles' Mayan factor. Except round this one you've got a sort of orbit with a little planet on it. Where is it? Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's just up here somewhere, as if it's just approaching a little transition line there. Could be, associating like an orbit of planet. Just a little possibility. It's tying Earth into to this 2012 thing here, because that's exactly what this diagram is about, the 13 Bacton cycle from 3114 BC to 2012. Yeah. This one was a 20 by 20 grid, 400, which there's 20 tuns in one Katun, 20 Katuns in one Bacton, 400. This one here, There, it's a 26 by 30 grid, which is 780. 3 Zolkins are 780 days, but it's also 1 Mars synodic cycle of 780 days. And I did find some lovely blown nodes in that one. This was an amazing one. They called it the Earth is Missing formation because it seemed to be a diagram of the solar system, but with all the orbits of the inner planets and the asteroid belt, but no Earth on its orbit. Sounded pretty ominous, but then they realised that it was very similar to the state the solar system was in if you looked at it from below on the day that it appeared. But they then sort of went forward looking from the standard position above the solar system and found it's also very similar to a configuration that occurred a little bit later on, and it turned out a few years later when this configuration occurred that it was a very significant day because there was a solar storm which caused a geomagnetic storm which made the northern lights come down to an unusual latitude, showing that this has got some there's a oh no, I think I'm actually associating with some. No, what it is, it's about, sorry, I'm confusing it with another one. It's about Venus. Basically, once you join all these dots up, it's showing you that this is during a transit of Venus. And so there's 65 of these in here as well. The whole thing is encoding Venus. And the interesting thing about 2012 is that the Venus transit is something that happens in 2012. And that ties in with this one because Venus does a little retrograde loop every 584 days, and when you join up the loops, it makes a pentagram, and that so 584 times 5 is the same as 8 times 365. 8 Maya halves is the same as 5 retrograde loops of Venus, exactly. And that's what really interests them. That's why they use the harb to track Venus. But if you add up these little bits in between, they come to 65. So that gives you, because it's 5 times 13 is 65, so that gives you the Venus number as well. And then you've got the same thing in miniature in the middle. So it could be a Venus transit cycle, but it could also be a precessional cycle because 65 bactons times 5 is 26,000 tons. Woo. So now, there was this formation appeared near Silbury Hill, and a guy called C. Lewis started making all kinds of claims about it being to do with 2012 after the Daily Mail newspaper or one of those newspapers had it on the front and called it the Doomsday Formation. Why? Because it looked like it had Maya-like glyphs in it. That's the only reason. So C. Lewis came up with all this calculation to show how it encoded the date of 21st December 2012, and everybody was really impressed and amazed. But in fact, he miscounted how many of these little things there were. So the theory fell to pieces, but nobody cared. And then because I exposed him, he changed his name to the Australian Scientist, which was the same name as a famous asteroid hoaxer. Now, I think I know who it is now, but I'm not going to tell you since we're being filmed.
Who was it?
I'll tell you and you tell.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't hear him. Sorry.
Anyway, Jaime Malson said these two had to do with 2012. Very vague sort of, people were getting excited, you see. Once we had those quite solid associations, people started saying 2 years ago, crop circle connector, somebody got on there and said every single crop circle was to do with 2012 and gave these ridiculous explanations, you know. But, you know, you've seen the best ones. These ones are not so convincing. Go on to the next one. This is the really convincing one, the next picture. Oh dear, it's broken. Can you click on that?
Yeah, it's not alert, it's doing that.
Oh, we've got the whirling beach ball from hell.
Okay, there you go.
Right. 15th of July 2008, at Avebury, we had a diagram of the solar system showing the inner planets, the sun, the outer planets. And when people got their astronomical software out, they could see that it was actually, the closest thing it was actually the 23rd of December 2012. except Pluto was in completely the wrong position. It was about 30 degrees off, although, of course, by then Pluto had been demoted, so it's not really a planet anymore. So some people are suggesting, well, perhaps it isn't Pluto, perhaps it's an asteroid. You know, perhaps this is something we haven't, you know, it's Nibiru, oh my God, etc. Not that I think it is, but it's still pretty a nice formation. The farmer chopped it out shortly after that. But what does it mean, though? These weird glyphs came up next to it that nobody has ever deciphered, which aren't on there because they were just out of shot.
Okay.
Never mind.
Okay. So I think that we're kind of pretty much coming to a close here because it is probably midnight or so. So, I mean, obviously there's so much speculation with 2012. I mean, if you really want to get deeply into it, you've really got to read Geoff's books Beyond 2012 and 2012 in Your Pocket, which are available at the back. And so are some of my stuff as well. But, you know, it could just be this. This could just actually be what it was all about.
But really, you know, what do we know about calendars? That's the Maya response to that last one.
Okay, I think we've had enough, and you've probably had enough. So thank you very much.
Thank you.